Good evening and welcome to the regular City Council meeting for the City of St. Peter, Minnesota. It is Monday, March 27th, 2023 at 7:04 p.m. We are now called to order. Would all please rise for the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First up on our agenda is the approval of the agenda. I see that everybody has a copy. Are there any revisions or corrections to the agenda as distributed? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approval signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The agenda is approved. Moving on to approval of the minutes. The minutes are printed in pages 5 through 9 of the packet. Are there any revisions or corrections to the minutes as distributed? Hearing nothing, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes are approved as distributed. Next up on the agenda, we have scheduled time for visitor comments. Is there any member of the audience who'd like to address the council on an agenda item later in the meeting? Hearing none, we have time for general visitor comments. Is there a member of the audience who'd like to address the council on any matter whatsoever? Hearing none, we will move on to approval of the consent agenda. The consent agenda begins on page 10 of the packet and concludes with a resolution printed on page 29. The resolution approving the consent agenda includes the following budgeted purchases in excess of $25,000 to Jensen Chrysler Dodge Jeep and Ram for a 2023 1500 Tradesman Quad Cab 4x4 truck for the price indicated in the packet. Jensen Chrysler Dodge Jeep and Ram for a 2023 1500 Tradesman Quad Cab 4x4 truck to R&E Enterprises for a 2023 bituminous street milling, Dirt Merchant Inc. for private water and sewer replacement assessment, Versa Court for Vets Memorial Park baseball court and hoops, and the following equipment for which the city no longer has a need is hereby declared as surplus and will be disposed of as provided for city code. That list is provided on page 29 of the packet, as well as the schedule of disbursements from March 9th, 2023 through March 22nd, 2023. Are there any questions or discussion about any consent agenda items? Brad?
A couple of questions. First, Pete, on the Versa Court, was there $50,000 budgeted for that?
That's correct. $50,000 was budgeted.
And is there more that's going to come, or is this the total?
We do have some hoops that we'll be purchasing that will be on the side there. This is for the court.
Okay. Do you know approximately how much the hoops are?
I do not off the top of my head, but we are still under budget.
Okay. Cool. That's all I was curious. I thought it was significantly lower than anticipated.
Yep, just part of what we're trying to accomplish there.
Great, thank you. And then the other question actually is on the surplus, the disposal of the surplus items. How are those going to be disposed? I know you talked about if they're not considered sellable, they would be disposed of in another way. Are they just going to be thrown in the trash? Are you going to offer them up for first come, first served? Do you try and, if it's like a metal drawer or something, just sell it for scrap metal?
All of the above.
Okay.
So it just really depends on the item. So really the first step in our process, when the department's getting rid of something, we put it out to all the other departments if they want to claim it or utilize it. But then it depends on what it is and what kind of shape it's in. Some of these items might wait till we have more of a garage sale type opportunity. Typically that's hosted through the community service officer. Some of these items might be listed on MinBid and they go away that way. And then if they're in really, really bad shape, like a file cabinet where the drawers don't open, it's not really repairable, or the amount of money that we'd spend getting it repaired is too much, oftentimes things like that go into Pete's scrap metal bin that then we sell, I don't know how many times a year, whenever it gets full.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any additional questions? Hearing none, the resolution before us is on page 29 of the packet. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Brunzak.
Aye.
Councilmember Sharpston.
Aye.
Councilmember Ramp.
Aye.
Councilmember Pettis.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Mayor Noel.
Aye.
Councilmember DeBosse.
Aye.
The consent agenda is approved. We have no items of unfinished business tonight. We'll move on to new business. The first item is adoption of an ordinance modifying the city code regulations for weed and tall grass. That memo starts on page 30 of the packet.
Mayor, member, the memo is included in your packet, as is the draft ordinance. You discussed this potential change on a number of different occasions. I do want to mention, and I think it's important to think about and talk about process, that this really started a while back as a part of the discussion at goal session. And so I think it's important for people to know that those things that you talk about move through a process and they arrive at this point, which is really a decision point. And so you've seen a number of different draft versions. The version that's included in your packet on page 32 is the last version that you gave me direction on to move forward to council vote. And so we've publicized this appropriately related to state statute. And so on page 32, which is where the ordinance is, let me just talk a little bit about that. This ordinance would modify how any enforcement action and on what enforcement action might take place within the city of St. Peter. And so where previously you had an ordinance that was arguably more restrictive, meaning that the allowance for folks to do things outside of we might consider the norm or the traditional treatment of lawns, and I use that term lawns very with some thought. This allows for people to maintain yards in almost any manner they see fit, with a few exceptions. The first exception would be is that if there were noxious weeds that were identified as a part of the Department of Ag, that's the Minnesota statute that's identified, that allows the commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Ag to establish the noxious weed list. So if I'm showing my age and my youthful employment as a bean walker. So if it was a buttonweed, as an example, and that was on the noxious weed list, that would be something that would not be allowed to be maintained on someone's property. And so if we received a report of that, or that was noticed by your service officer, then people would be notified to remove, the property owner would be notified to remove that noxious weed, and they'd have a certain period of time to remove that noxious weed. At that point, if they had not provided for that removal, they could be ticketed, or the weed could be removed and the cost of that would be assessed, could be assessed to that property. This ordinance provides for, again, someone on the vast majority of their yard, or what they might consider their yard, to do anything that they want, except noxious weeds. In addition to that, it provides a space on private property, which is using a common lot frontage that might have a sidewalk in front of it. Approximately 4 feet in or towards the house of the sidewalk is restricted. That too would require that no noxious weeds be in place, but it would require that the height of any vegetation that's there be maintained at a maximum of 12 inches. It also requires, as a part of this ordinance, that boulevards, and this is common within Minnesota communities, it's common that the abutting property owner must maintain the boulevard, even though they might not be in ownership of the boulevard. So that would be that area, again using my example, from between the sidewalk to the curb line. They must maintain that in a certain way, a certain fashion. And so in this instance, the ordinance then says, well, that has to be maintained at a height that is no higher than 12 inches, and also removal of the noxious weeds. The penalty provisions are not changed as a part of this ordinance, and it provides, again, wider latitude for people to utilize the property that they own in the way that they seem fit within those 2 or 3 primary boundaries that I've outlined. I'm happy to answer any questions that I can on this. Again, you've had a number of opportunities to talk about this and have been through a number of different drafts, iterations. And so I think the goal has been to meet really the 4 or 5 goals that were established at the beginning, which is to simplify not only the ordinance, but how enforcement may or may not take place. to provide additional opportunity for folks to plant their yards as they desire. It provides those opportunities and, I think does it in a clear, simple way. Madam Mayor, I'm happy to answer any questions that folks might have.
Questions or discussion regarding this? Brad? Sorry, Dustin?
Wow. All right. Now I really need to
Let me
rise to the occasion.
take
So
off my reading
I had
glasses.
the opportunity to speak with Janet, our enforcement officer, to speak with Pete about it, to speak with Todd about it, and I heard from multiple constituents. And the one piece that I am concerned about is the language associated with it being 12 inches. I'm not concerned with any person who's doing pollinator gardens, that's doing intentional plantings. And in speaking with Janet, we've issued 0 citations or tickets for that in recent history. However, the concern is those people who are not maintaining their property in any way, shape, or form, giving them that additional 6 inches from our current policy before we intervene. So I did take the opportunity to review a handful of other ordinances that have been modified to accommodate planting areas, such as this. And the common length for that is between 6 and 9 inches for most of those policies. So I think in talking to Janet, I would really like to table this for a further work session instead of putting it for a vote today.
Is there a second to the, we have a, was that a motion to table?
Sure.
All right, is there a second to the motion to table?
Oh,
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there discussion on the motion to table? I think Emily had her
You
hand
do
up.
have-
Not on the motion to table.
Okay,
I had it.
Brad.
The only thing I would recommend as we table this is that we put it, as we discuss this, as the first item on the agenda at a workshop, just because we have council members who have to go to other things typically later in the workshop, whether it be the third Monday, and we have Parks Board meetings and stuff. If we put it at the beginning of a workshop, we'll basically have an opportunity for all of us to participate in it.
Sure. Dustin?
I don't think we're that far off. I think we just need a little bit of clarification with that language to make sure we are still able to enforce the properties that are not maintaining.
Sure. Any other questions or discussion? All right, we have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
It's a simple voice.
Oh, it's a
Voice vote.
voice vote for table? All right, all those in favor say aye. We're voting right now on whether or not to table this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? This item will be tabled. It's gonna go back to a workshop for the council. Thanks very much. Moving on, adoption of a resolution awarding a bid for furnishing an electric transformer, and Pete is here to talk about that.
Madam Mayor and City Council, part of your electric master plan includes evaluating improvements that we will need for the next 20 years in St. Peter to make sure that we have a reliable and dependable electric system. Something that we've talked about kind of in good humor the last 10 years has been the replacement of the Front Street substation transformer. Initially, when we've talked about it, the prices have been anywhere between $500,000 and $1.5 million. And we have received bids for this unit, and it did come in just under $1 million. Now, that includes 2 different phases of the project. The base bid, which included the transformer, the building of the transformer, delivery of the transformer, and placement, would be about $942,898. Field services, which includes the placement of the transformer in place, unloading the transformer, which is probably gonna weigh about 80,000 pounds, and getting it tested and ready for service is gonna be another $46,500. Total owning cost is something that we use as an evaluation tool when we buy equipment like this. And this also includes 2 phases. One is the purchase price, and then the other price is what does it cost us to own this piece of equipment for the next 20 years? And we put those two together, especially when we're talking about electric transformers, to find out what that operating cost or owning cost is going to be over this period of time. As you're aware, on page 33, Pennsylvania Transformer Technologies supplied the lowest owning cost for the unit and also the lowest total purchase price. What we will do now, we will work with Pennsylvania Transformer to work out some development and some delivery times and purchase price. So we know that we're gonna go with a firm pricing on this unit here, and we know what we will be paying. We just have to work out some details, how much we gotta pay up front. We think it's gonna be in the 25 to 30% range, and then we'll get into some of our, probably use reserves to fund that until such time as the other portions of the improvements come in, which will be about 75 weeks from now. Once we get the transformer purchased, it'll take that long before delivery comes, which will put us into late summer, early fall of 2024. And at that time, we will also have another project that comes before you, which is the switchgear inside the substation that will tie to the transformer, and then we'll put that package back together. Right now, we're just working on the financing to get everything ordered, so we'll have some capital outlay. But what we are asking is that you approve the resolution on page 37 after our bids have been received here, so that we can authorize the transformer to be ordered.
All right. Questions for Pete? Brad?
So Pete, thanks for explaining better the total owning cost and the time frame that you typically projected over that. I was actually gonna ask that question. And then, my next question is, so what were you projecting, what were you anticipating, was the transformer itself? I know you had said over time we were looking at 5.5, or 500,000 to 1.5 million, but when we actually were doing the budget for this year, what were you anticipating?
We
the
have $1 million in the budget.
You had $1 million, so this came in right at about what
Right.
you were budgeting. Okay, and then just curious, why aren't you looking at, like you said, like the switchgear we're gonna have to order, are those not as far behind as transformers at this point?
Good question. So what we'll do is to develop the switchgear project and to make that installation, it's kind of a phased-in process is what we have to do, and we have to take the substation, at least half of it, out of service in order to put the switchgear in. And we can't do that with the load that we currently have from about May 1 to about the end of September. So it's a little risky in October, but we can still reestablish that load into other areas of our electric system. And so then we will take that out of service, October, November, December, January, and February. We'll have about 5 months to make that all, the switchgear changeover and the transformer installation.
Oh yeah, I was just asking why you aren't ordering the switchgear now, I guess is like.
Because it doesn't take as long to deliver.
Okay, thank
So
you.
we'll start putting that project together now. We think that's probably about 30 weeks.
Okay,
And so we'll phase that in on the next, and we don't want to have it sitting here too much ahead of time, because once it's delivered on site, usually we'll have to pay about 50% of the total project before it's installed. So what we really like to do is retain a contractor and have that as part of their project, and then when it comes in, already have them working on the substation.
and I assume you probably have Jason or whatever studying the availability of switchgears just to make sure in
Right,
case things start
DGR has
to
been doing
stretch
that
out
for
there.
us. Yep.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Additional questions?
The current transformer that we have now, we've talked about refurbished transformers and what have you, and
Right.
is the current transformer worth anything
Um,
once we get the new transformer
It
put
is
into
and it
place?
isn't, because of the degree of difficulty to move it. There aren't a lot of communities willing to take that risk. I mean, if we're getting rid of it, there's probably a good reason why they're probably not interested. Fairmont's in the same boat we are right now. They're taking out a transformer about the same size, and we thought, boy, maybe we should look at that unit and just have it on hand here in case. But it would cost us more than the field services just to get that in here, and so it really isn't worth it from that point. There will be some salvage value afterwards, so we'll have to see how that all pans out and what they can do.
Okay.
Derek?
They're also full of PCBs too. aren't
Yeah, well, these oil has been changed, so these shouldn't have that in there. Even though the age of those, we did switch those oils out.
they? Thank you.
Additional questions? Hearing none, the resolution awarding bid for furnishing an electric power transformer is on page 37 of the packet. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second,
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Sharpsburg,
Aye.
Councilmember Rath,
Aye.
Councilmember Pettis.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson,
Aye.
Mayor Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos,
Aye.
Councilmember Rutherford.
Aye.
The resolution is approved. Moving on to adoption of a resolution awarding a bid for 2023 seal coating project. Pete.
Madam Mayor and City Council, part of our regular street maintenance program is to do seal coating. It's a process that we go through on a regular basis. We usually take 1 year and we seal all the cracks. The following year, after we've had a little bit of settling and sealing on there, we do come by and do seal coating where we apply an oil, add some rock to it, run over it with a large roller, and make those streets build up a little bit and add some useful life to them. As you can see, this year, the low bid was from Allied Blacktopping. They are a firm that has worked with us for the last couple of years, have been the low bidders. They like working with their city crew. They come in, they do a fine job, they're in and out, and very dependable to work with. And as you can see, we did have some very consistent bids. And part of the prices that you're seeing here is when a contractor has a fairly full work schedule, you can see their prices escalate, meaning that they'll make it work if they can get the bid, but they're gonna do it for a profit. And so we're really happy working both with the top two companies there to make that happen. That is a budget number that we have out there, about 184,351. So we will use up to that limit. And if we make adjustments in other places of our street maintenance program, we may add a little or we may subtract others if we have other needs within our department. There is a resolution on page 40 that would approve us to move ahead with the seal coating portion of the project.
Thank you. Any questions for Pete? Carrie?
So you talked about this process of alternating years. When we do seal coating, are we doing specific zones of the town?
We
Or
are.
are we doing a widespread?
Right, no, we'll do a variety. It really goes into patching 1 year, sometimes what they call pan patching, where there'll be larger areas that we overlay. And then in some areas, we'll cut it all the way out and then repave that area and then wait a few years, seal the cracks, and then over seal this. This is kind of that last step in that sealing process over a 4 to 5 year cycle.
Thank you.
So if I can,
Yes.
just for clarification, because I want to make sure that the council understands Pete's process here. Pete is not telling you that we only seal coat every 3rd or 4th or 5th year. We really do seal coating every year.
Every year.
What he's just doing is describing a specific block. The first part in that might be pan, cutting, it might be crack filling, then the following year, seal coating comes up. So every year, Pete's team does about 100 blocks of seal coating,
Yep.
give or take a little bit, depending on pricing and budget.
Additional questions? The resolution awarding bid for 2023 street seal coat project is on page 40 of the packet. If there's no further discussions, we'll take a motion to approve.
So moved. Second?
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Rath,
Aye.
Councilmember Pettis.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson,
Aye.
Mayor Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos,
Aye.
Councilmember Rutherford,
Aye.
Councilmember Sharpsburg.
Aye.
The resolution is approved.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. Moving on, adoption of a resolution establishing a daycare task force. That memo starts on page 41 of the packet, and here's Joey to talk to us about it.
Thank you, Mayor Noel and council members. I am with you tonight to ask you to establish a 2023 daycare task force that hopefully will help identify and gather valuable information related to daycare in St. Peter. So over the last couple months, we've kind of discussed daycare in St. Peter and also gauged your interest in how maybe the city can help or identify shortcomings or struggles or opportunities around daycare in St. Peter, and also bring up the fact that there is a history of previous council establishing a daycare task force. So on page 41, there are names identified who are willing to serve on a task force, and the goal of these individuals were to have a group of people who are in this situation, you know, and know daycare and what's going on, and get everyone together and help, you know, find some resources for the community. And then also identify if the city can be a partner in this, or if this is a city solution to a problem, or if we can connect them to resources, or if maybe the city just isn't the right partner in that situation as well. So we also have identified some goals for this task force that could look something like this. Identify challenges to access and provision of daycare services. Identify additional stakeholders in this area that could provide additional assistance to users and providers. Provide recommendations related to mitigating identified challenges for both users and providers. And then at the end, provide a report to City Council that can be shared with others related to the above mentioned goals. I do want to point out as well, the individuals listed on this list, if you establish this task force tonight, we would hope we'd also have some flexibility in once we get together on bringing others to the table. You know, I imagine if this group gets together, they're going to identify individuals who maybe have some expertise that maybe this group is lacking, or that way. So we hope we have that flexibility to do that, as well as at least be part of the process, maybe not the appointed task force. With that, we see very little fiscal impact for establishing a daycare task force, and there's a resolution on page 43 that would establish the members of this daycare task force, but I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much. Questions for Joey? Brad?
So Joey, thank you very much for leading us up. I think you're doing a great job, and this is no slight on you because I've been guilty of this as well. But I would like to, I will move the resolution, but in changing the words daycare in each section to childcare. It was brought up, I was thinking about it as I looked at this weekend, but it was Larry Taylor, Glenn Taylor's brother, on our last task force pointed out, which he had instructors tell him, you know, the days take care of themselves, we're taking care of children. And I heard somebody say it last night at the event I was at last night. It was on clean energy, but childcare came up, and these people said daycare, and someone said it's not the daycare, the days take care of themselves. So I will move the resolution, but with an amendment to change where daycare is listed to childcare. So just as a reminder, quite honestly, is what this task force is for, because there are other forms of daycare. So
Thanks. I never thought of that myself. It's an interesting perspective. Any other questions or comments? Carrie?
Well, I just think it's amazing for the council to sort of come together and think of an idea, and just the way that it's carried out. The work that you've done is really incredible and very thoughtful. I'm really excited to hear the feedback, and I think another way that this can be helpful is being able to share the information with our legislators and with the foundations that are out there that already do work in childcare. I think it's somewhat it's easier to find broader data for greater Minnesota than it is to really like hone in on a city. And so I think we're going to get some good information that we can really share the story of what St. Peter's impact is in the child care crisis, which we know anecdotally, talking to our friends and neighbors, how challenging it is. But we can perhaps put some numbers and more than anecdotal information. This task force has a lot of experience within it, and it's a great group, and I really appreciate all your work on this. Thank you.
I'll just say thanks to Carrie, because you really brought this up as an item that you wanted the council to take up, and Brad for serving on the group, because you've got a lot of experience with daycare, just a little bit. So is there any further discussion? We have a motion from Brad, so we need a second
I'll second.
to approve the resolution. All right, we have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Pettis,
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson,
Aye.
Mayor Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos,
Aye.
Councilmember Bluefett,
Aye.
Councilmember Sharpstown,
Aye.
Councilmember Ramey.
Aye.
The resolution is approved. Let's see, our last item of business under new business is the adoption of a resolution approving tree worker applications.
Mayor members, as you know, with most licenses that come before the city council, renewals go on the consent agenda, but new licenses come to you as separate agenda items for action. You'll see the information included in your packet and the resolution on page 46. This would be for 3 new tree worker licenses for Cars Tree Service, Hack Outdoor Service, Cars Tree Service, Hack Outdoor Services, and True Green. And all of these run through the end of April of 2024. Happy to answer any questions in doing the background on these, which is required as a part of the licensing. We saw nothing that would prohibit any of these from receiving the license.
Brad?
Well, I'm confused about essentially the last sentence in the first paragraph, which is, however, is it Hawk Outdoor Services would be limited to cutting, trimming, pruning, and removing trees, shrubs, and vines as they do not carry the proper certificates for tree care. I mean, if they're cutting, trimming, pruning, and removing trees, what other parts of tree care are left?
You know, Councilmember DeVos, I don't know the answer to that. I'll be happy to provide some additional information based on another review of their application.
Okay, it just seemed odd that all those things in
I would imagine some things like injecting trees for EAB, things like that. Okay,
Okay.
Pete is nodding, so that is,
Okay,
In the other sentence, in the first sentence, it says trimming, pruning, removing,
Oh, okay.
spraying, and that is
oh,
left
the
out.
spraying or otherwise treating, so I suppose chemicals. and
Sure.
stuff.
Chemical
Yeah.
based, something like that.
any additional questions? All right, hearing no further discussion, the resolution approving new tree worker license applications is on page 46 of the packet. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Johnson,
Aye.
Mayor Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos,
Aye.
Councilmember Bluefett,
Aye.
Councilmember Sharpstown,
Aye.
Councilmember Ramey,
Aye.
Councilmember Pettis.
Aye.
The resolution is approved. We will move on to reports. I have nothing to report tonight, so we will move on to reports from council members. Are there any council members who'd like to report at this time? Brad?
So last night I had the privilege, on Friday I got a last minute invitation from Region 9. They had an opening for a gathering for a German delegation coming over here, first to Minneapolis, and then they're heading on to Chicago. But because Region 9, they had sent a delegation over to Germany to learn more about clean energy and the circular economy. They wanted to make sure while this delegation was here in Minnesota, they were able to get together and visit with them. So this delegation, they were from, and I learned a lot about one specific region of Germany. They were from North Rhine-Westphalia, which is apparently the most populous of Germany's 16 states. There's 20 million out of the 82 million people in Germany live there. And what they came to do, I mean, we had people from both their business sector as well as their government ministries talking about, what they're doing from a recycling standpoint. Looking at things from a circular economy, everything from taking the minerals out of the ground to production, to usage, to really not disposal, but recycling, from the concept of not just burning things down and reusing them, but basically reusing glass bottles. Back in the day, a lot of us remember the returnable bottles. That's a very common thing that now they're doing over there, putting the fees in place that really compel people to use glass. Another thing there, that some restaurants are now being made to do is actually takeout containers, having reusable ones that you return to the restaurant and the restaurant cleans. And so they were sharing some of that information. And it was great to meet individuals from other organizations, such as the Clean Energy Economy Minnesota scene, who they look at things from the business side of things as far as how that works from the clean energy perspective. They talked about wanting to come to do a presentation with the city on that side of things, and they emphasize they're not just looking at it from a city perspective, but from a business perspective. It was a gathering. it was focused on New Ulm just because the German heritage, they wanted to get the Germans together with representatives from New Ulm. So it was very heavily focused representation there, but there were representatives from St. James, Comfrey, St. Peter, Watonwan County, Brown County, Mankato. There was actually a special note when they were talking about not only recycling and such, but resilience. There was a call out for St. Peter and Comfrey, and they actually had the newspaper article from yesterday about the tornado and the resilience both communities have shown over time, recovering from the tornado. I was talking to Mike Lavin, the president of the Mankato City Council. Some of the things they're looking at, their strategic planning right now, and they've done they're completing an inventory of all their vehicles and equipment and looking at what are the options for electrification here, and so they're doing a complete inventory analysis of that. And as always somehow happens with these events, I made 2 connections on childcare. But the one thing, and finally, last but not least, I talked briefly to Andrea Becker, who Carrie should be familiar with. She's the New Ulm City Council President, and she's Vice Chair of Region 9, and had very complimentary things to say with her time on Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities with Councilmember Carrie Johnson. So she's very impressed with you. And I think just hearing that from another member of a city council who's also involved with these commissions, I think that's something that we should be proud of, that we're represented so well out there. But these things, it's very eye-opening to see what's going on. There's a lot we can do. I got a lot of business cards, and I've got people to talk to, and I'm going to try and, work with Todd and Pete and stuff and see if we can get some more presentations here to the city to talk about moving things forward. Not Germans, but but some of these other entities. So.
Thanks very much, Brad. Any other reports? Well, thanks, Brad, for your report, and thanks for representing us with Region 9. Todd, moving on to City Administrator report.
Members, I have 2 reports for tonight. First of all is to mention the DOT open house on highways related to 169, 99, and 22. I'm trying to think when that occurs.
April 5th?
Thank you. And so there's a great opportunity for folks to know more about the construction project that's going to be undertaken. We've seen some work starting on that, and want to give people an opportunity to know so they can make their travel easier, safer. And it's a major project on the edge of our community that will impact traffic in the downtown area and has a cost to all of us related to utility costs and other things. So we want people to be aware of that. The second one relates to Hallett's Pond and the park that's under development. We have a couple of opportunities for people to learn or provide input on those. And so Joey or Pete, I'll let one of you guys jump in. We're doing something that is done other places but is new to us, related to doing a pop-up input session. So ask you to share just a little bit about that and the work of the Parks Board.
We had a couple things planned for that area. One would be working with Hy-Vee on Wednesday the 29th to have a pop-up event that coincides with their specials. So come down and read their ads, then stop in, and we'll be at the front door. Some of our staff will, and working on how the park is going to be laid out and some of the ingredients that are going to go into that park. And maybe Joey wants to touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, so 3 to 6 on Wednesday in the Hy-Vee kind of entrance. This community engagement is kind of really similar to what we did with Gorman Park when we had our community engagements, where our Parks Board kind of narrowed down some potential play features and native areas and such, and narrowed it down. And we're going to hope that the community comes out and helps narrow it down further. And so they'll be able to have the opportunity to do that and have some short answer response to if it can't be captured with a dot on a picture. And so we're hoping to get some good feedback there. And then we have another one the next day. Yep. Here at the community center in the lobby area. So that's Thursday, March 30th, again, 3 to 6 p.m. So hoping people come out and take a look for sure.
We'll promote that in other places as well, but wanting you to know that that was going on. And the Parks Board and certainly all of you and your staff is working really hard to make sure that people have a feel for what's going on and an opportunity to provide some of their perspective and how they want to use parks within St. Peter.
Carrie, let's say you can't attend the pop-up, but you want to share feedback, and it's not on a Facebook comment. You want to share feedback in a really productive way. How can you do that?
I would say email, directly email in, and maybe when we're adding some advertisements coming up, we'll put an email where we take comments in.
So email you, Joey, or email Pete, or is there
Either
going to be a
one's fine.
specific?
All of the above, yeah.
Okay.
But we'll make sure to have something in there specific as well, so people are aware.
That would be great. I think for those listening, the best way and most productive way to share feedback is not always on a Facebook comment. It's to go to the source and to talk to us on the city council. Share your thoughts, because that's how we make these great opportunities work for our community.
It really helped with Gorman Park, so it's nice to have that
We
public
want
feedback.
community input, for sure.
Madam Mayor, that's all I have for reports, although I do have a request for you to pass a resolution related to closed session. The first item would be on some real estate negotiations and related to Traverse Green, and the second would be on a possible lease of a lot located at 107 West Nassau Street. We might commonly refer to that as the old library lot. So I would anticipate that when you come back into open session, you will only come back in to adjourn. There's no action planned related to either of these two tonight.
The resolution calling for a closed session is on page 47 of the packet. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the resolution?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Mayor Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember DeBosk,
Aye.
Councilmember Blueflat,
Aye.
Councilmember Sharpston,
Aye.
Councilmember Ramp,
Aye.
Councilmember Pettis,
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
The resolution is approved. It is 7:45 PM. We will adjourn to closed session
Nicola.
in the Nicollet room.
So normally we're in the Traverse City room, folks, so it's the littler one that's east of there, one door down. And just for some information, I just passed these out quick if you want to take a